Marty Whitmore,
Present.
Kathy Chandler Henry, Tom Alvey,
Here.
Dave Merritt,
Present.
Mike Ritschsrd,
Here.
Kathleen Curry,
Here.
Stan Winery,
Here.
Steve Aquafresca,
Here.
Tom Gray,
Yep.
Mark Catlett,
Yes, ma'am, I'm here.
John Ely, Al Vandenbrink,
Here,
Doug Monger,
I'm here.
Monger's,
Judy Hazard,
Monger's here.
Here.
thank you. Taylor Hawes.
Here.
Madam President, you do have a quorum.
Thank you very much, Lori. The agenda this morning calls for us to once again go into executive session. Peter, do you want to take care of explaining what we've got in executive session and setting us up for that, please?
Sure thing. Thank you, Madam President. Pursuant to CRS section 24-6-402 paren 4 B and E, I would recommend that the board convene into executive session pursuant to that statutory provision to discuss the matters that are listed under agenda item 12A Romanet 6, which is also a continuation of the agenda item 6A Roman 7 from yesterday's agenda. Pursuant to our common interest confidentiality joint defense agreement with the Southwestern District, I would invite or request that the board invite Counsel for Southwestern Beth Van Verst into that discussion, as well as our expert consultant, John Karen.
Do we have any other staff who should be included in that, Peter?
I believe that staff is appropriate for this discussion.
Okay. Is there a motion to go into executive session?
So moved, Merritt.
Second? Thank you. We've got a motion and a second to go into executive session. All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed, nay. We will move into executive session. And Peter, do we need to continue recording this session?
In my opinion, the substance of the communications in executive session will constitute attorney-client communications and attorney work product for which no further recording needs to be made.
Okay. Lori, if you'll stop the recording, and we are now in executive session.
Again, do the summary.
Okay. So we are now leaving executive session, everyone.
I just had a quick question, Andy, and I don't know if you can scroll down through the document.
We're back in now. I think everybody's public is here and the recording is on. So Peter, if you will.
Thank you. Thank you, President Whitmore. During the executive session portion of the River District's board meeting this morning, the board discussed and provided guidance to staff and counsel on the matters listed under the River District's agenda 12A on its agenda. And I do not believe that any formal action was proposed or contemplated to be taken.
Thank you very much. All right, everyone, let's move into director's updates and concerns. I'm just going to go as I see people on my screen. So we'll start with Director Aquafresca. You're muted, Steve.
I have to do that at least once.
Okay.
I haven't prepared anything I've taken a few notes. A lot of things are on our minds. Here in the county where I reside, of course, there's a great deal of angst regarding the purchase of irrigated farmland by out-of-state profiteers. And we're relying on several of these ongoing processes to address that. And we're certainly available to provide input and feedback as those processes occur. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Director Gray.
Yeah, thank you. I don't have too much. I know we're probably behind a little. Up here in the lower Yampa, we have the River District working diligently, as we talked a bit yesterday, about being able to use some Elkhead releases to help with water needs in the Yampa, but not just give them away, figuring out a way to get for the enterprise fund to get paid for that. And also within the basin and the roundtable, we've been developing principles for the straw man that CWCB's working on for demand management. And we have a little bit of concern. We have a little bit of concern that there's a black hole there. And I know this is a public session, so there'll be those listening. We think that before rather than after a straw man comes out, hopefully the CWCB will be listening to input from basins. And that's about all I have.
Thank you. Director Elvey.
Thanks. Similarly, it's pretty quiet here in Delta County. We're watching the snowpack and there's not much to watch. So at the moment, it's pretty alarming, but we do have some time. One thing related to the fact that it's pretty quiet here, that is a concern I have no solution for, but this ongoing pandemic has really influenced our water user groups. We've had a number of ditch companies and water groups that have not been able to have their annual meetings. And this is beginning to have an impact on discussions and information flow. I think it's something we'll have to continue to be aware of and look for solutions to.
Thank you. Director Merritt.
Well, I hadn't anticipated being here, but I do look forward to seeing, how the district is able to implement the new program with partnership. It's a great flexibility the district has going forward. I also will be watching from afar the demand management and the reservoir operations issues. Very concerned about both of those, that we, maintain Western Colorado's ability to continue to use our water. So, thank you.
Thank you. Director Ritschsrd.
Thank you. First thing from Grand County, I'd certainly like to thank the directors, Andy and the River District staff for the support of the Windy Gap Connectivity Channel through the Partnership Project Funding Program. This will be the pilot program, and I really hope that this puts this project over the top to where they can get it completed. Thank you very much, directors, on that. Going back to the October meeting, the East Troublesome Fire was just really getting going. On that Tuesday, I made a comment that a lot of that country needs to burn. Who would have guessed the next day we were going to see 100,000 acres go up in smoke in a 24-hour time period? Absolutely incredible what happened there. Basically moving clear into the Estes Park side. Just the dry conditions and the timber being ready to go, and the grasses that were left there caused this fire to do some incredible things. Other than that, extremely dry year. We're starting up here, and we're hoping for moisture. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Winery.
Here in Hinsdale County, it's pretty quiet. It's been cold. I mean, lack of snow from the different parts of the state, although there's some bright spots, some people who have snowmobiled on top of Engineer and Cinnamon Pass, that there's like 5 or 6 feet of snow there. we've had a lot of wind, which has hopefully built up some large drifts, but we need some more snow. And, you know, the same thing with the pandemic, housing market, people have moved here. I think some of them have some unrealistic ideas on what they're gonna see, but I'm deathly afraid of another East Troublesome fire or a Cameron Peak fire. I think you're just beginning to see, and hopefully we can work on helping some of those folks out when those crises come. Thanks.
Thank you. Director Curry.
Thank you. The things that I had planned to mention have already been mentioned, but I'll just repeat them in the Gunnison Basin or in the Gunnison County area. I think the partnership program is an exciting opportunity for us, and we're looking forward to submitting grant applications, identifying project priorities, and I think that's a real positive. The snowpack is obviously a concern, the lack thereof. But a lot of the seasoned guys are saying, no, 95 kind of looked like this. And then we had a good year ultimately. And so we're not panicking yet. The forest health issue that was mentioned earlier is starting to occupy the thoughts of more people. All of our high elevation drainages have a lot of dead timber, a lot of dead trees, and we're getting a little concerned now. And I think there's potential to build some partnerships locally and elevate that issue and start addressing it more proactively. So I see some progress there. And then the pandemic has had a pretty significant economic impact on a lot of folks. We have a service economy, a tourist economy, and everybody's just ready for that to wind down, but obviously we don't know when that'll happen. So thank you.
Thank you. Director Hawes.
Yeah, thank you. I would say the biggest thing for Summit County right now is kind of a transition right now. Karn has been in these water roles and wore many hats, and with her departure as county commissioner, the county's scrambling a little bit to fill some of these roles, like on the Basin Roundtable and the River District. And so it's hopefully bringing up a new group of folks that will be able to participate in these kinds of forums going forward, but that's certainly one thing that's top of mind. I haven't had my first meeting. I'll have my first meeting with Josh Blanchard, our new commissioner who took Karn's spot here in a few weeks, and so we'll continue to be learning more about what the county's most interested in. But I do know from talking to Karn and just on the phone with Josh that the issues really that are top of mind are climate change, the snowpack situation, and then, as others have mentioned, fire risk. This, like Grand County, this is kind of ground zero for beetle kill. So we're definitely, was hard to watch even from one county over what was happening on the East Troublesome fire last year. But I do think there's a real opportunity with the partnership program. And one thing it's been interesting to watch is the state has lost funding for roundtable activities and projects there to have 7A kind of maybe backfill some of that and the partnership program. So I know folks are very excited and interested to kind of see where that program goes and hopefully have some good projects on the ground. And then, like others have mentioned too, the impact of the pandemic, especially in a tourism economy for ski areas. Not only is the pandemic having a big impact, but lack of snow is also really impacting the ski areas. So we're kind of feeling it on both sides. Thanks.
Thank you. Director Catlin.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Well, here in Montrose, it's pretty quiet the way, just like the rest of you said. I think everybody's looking towards the mountains to see what they think is going to happen. And I know there are some growers here in the community that are taking a look at some of the marginal ground and deciding whether or not they would plant that marginal ground in order to hold the water right so that they can irrigate their better ground. You know, some drought management is what you would call that we've been doing for years and years. Storage up at the Blue, up in Taylor Park, all the places that we depend upon are low. So, you know, DK's report yesterday that this was the driest winter we've had was pretty much of a shock. We know it, but yet we haven't put it in words yet. So, you know, after it gets put in words, you really are shocked. You know, one of the things that's happening is agriculture is in a tough spot. So, you know, now to go into maybe a different, even a deeper drought or a more drastic drought this year is making a lot of people consider what's going on, what do I need to do in order to survive. But, you know, I'm a believer that we're all pretty resilient. I'm a believer that if there's anybody that'll figure a way to do it, it'll be farmers and ranchers. Because they've been pretty self-reliant for a long time. So, you know, I can't really give you an update. I know that, you know, COVID numbers are the same in Montrose County as there are in a lot of yours. We're going to try and we're going to soldier through this, believe me, all of us. Everybody in this district is going to make it. But anyway, thank you.
Thank you very much. Director Vandenbrink.
Good morning and thanks. I guess in Rio Blanco County, we have been working with the U.S. Forest Service because they briefed us recently on wanting to do some forest work up there and some clear cutting to get some forest health back in there and to clear out some of these aspen groves and to kind of push some of these areas back and to take care of that forest health. Unfortunately, they're getting some pushback from some groups that don't necessarily see it that way. They want you to kind of leave it alone. Unfortunately, that is problematic. So, but I don't know how many of you may or may not be aware of this, but in June, our state activated the drought mitigation and response plan that was chaired by the DNR, Department of Local Affairs, and the Department of Agriculture. Then in September, expanded to the entire state. And then in November, they activated a full state drought, Colorado Drought Mitigation and Response Plan, which the activation that they've done now is the first time in full Colorado history to where they're really getting into the weeds here of this thing a little bit. They did have a previous time where they activated it, but it ended up being a conference call, and that was all further it went. But it's gone much further than that right now. And with this phase 3 activation, they activated the Municipal Water Task Force, and it's chaired by the CWCB and the Department of Local Affairs. And I know within our county, we've got Rangeley, Rio Blanco Water Conservancy District, and both the White River and Douglas Creek Conservation District working with all three to both of these plans as full activation here from the agricultural water supply. That's my area for ag and all that, ag and industry and municipal that I work in, but also the town of Rangeley for their municipal piece. So, and the piece that is the initial objective of the task force is to for water suppliers to coordinate with each other and the state going into the winter and prepare for anticipated drought-related challenges and opportunities in 2021. And I guess that brings me to where we've had conversations going forward with our state leaders within the DNR and CWCB and the Department of Local Affairs, and we're asking them, what do you want us to do? Because you're telling us that we've got to impose our own demand management today as we're trying to develop a drought contingency plan, but do our own demand management today to where it's supplied through irrigation return flows. So that's kind of tough if we're looking at having to shut down ag right now, or who, so we can keep water in the river further downstream, because simply there's just not the supply there when you've got a system that, as I mentioned yesterday, has been built on 140 years of a drought contingency plan that's based off of ag return flows and flood irrigation. Where last year in November, we had ranchers that were still irrigating late to get that deep percolation into the ground in anticipating for what's going on this year. So within our county, you're seeing this take a little bit more active approach because we don't know what to do, because we don't have what you would say is that sacrificial bucket or that savings account that we could just go ahead and release. So luckily we did, the district did get a water right recently for the Wolf Creek Reservoir to kind of give everybody a sigh of relief that there is an opportunity to keep building and planning for a drought resiliency within our county. But we don't know if we're going to be able to get it done quick enough before you start having some real issues, because you're looking at a project that's got several years to go yet before you're turning dirt. So when you're looking at even the realistic demand management here, you've got a part of the world here that's kind of holding their breath that Mother Nature will release a fury in May and dump buckets worth of snow or yards worth of snow up in the high country so we can get through. So we're not just sitting around. We've got things going on here. We've got a lot of people active. We've got a county with numerous people going across here that are actively involved. We've got several dozens of people, and they are working towards this because they're fearful. And we've got ranchers that are coming forward now asking us what to do because they're okay with a year or two drought, but we're going into how many years now? And last year we had several push-up dams in the White River, and they actually built a push-up dam below Taylor Draw Dam to get a couple of intakes filled. So we've got ranchers that are deficit irrigating right now. They're getting prepared to do more of that. They're working with less crops than what they had in previous years again. So they're doing the best they can with what water they have, but they're not getting enough crop to feed all their livestock. So you've got a few guys that are selling off their portions of their herd because one, you can't buy the hay because one, you can't grow it because it's just not available. And the other, if it is available, you can't afford it. So the cost for going ranching is going up. And I heard Kathleen Curry, Director Curry, talk about that yesterday a little bit. And it's realistic when you're looking at a small community that is struggling, and now you see more issues compounding onto our agricultural piece. And then it sounds like BLM is going to be cutting the AMUs out there due to the drought as well. So they're going to have fewer livestock up in the hills. And if they don't have the hay down the lowland to feed them, and what's that going to do? So there's some real issues here going on in our part of the world, and we're working towards it, but we're hoping that we can at least have some conversations to keep this moving forward in an efficient fashion so folks don't have to hold their breath the way they are right now, because frankly, they're on edge. They're very nervous of what's going to happen. So I'll leave it with that. So thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Director Hazard. Reby, are you there?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, there we go. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you. Well, thank you, Al, for all of your input. I can't follow up on that much, but the drought's the same in our area. Little snowstorms, we might get 2 to 4 inches of snow, but we have so much wind. Also, our last good snow was in October, and I guess thankfully we've had negative below zero temperatures. So a lot of that snow that we got in October is in ice in places. Up high seems to be better, but with the wind, you can just see that snow blowing. So fire risk is also important to us. We're a little bit away, as in Kathleen is in the same boat. I mean, our fire people are a long distance from us. Also, the Forest Service has been doing controlled burns, which is good because of the beetle kill and whatever else is out there. And that's scary too, because it is so dry and the winds just pick up. So I guess that's the majority for us. So I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Director Munger.
So I guess first off, I wanted to mention the potential over allocation of the Yampa, the designation, and I don't pose that as a threat. I find that half glass full, and maybe there's an opportunity there especially an opportunity for Elkhead Reservoir to come up with that master augmentation plan, and we can actually start selling some water out of there. I think that's a good thing. And again, we have a master augmentation plan out of Stagecoach. By the time you end up having your transit losses and the rest, that's probably not going to be very good. I'm very impressed with the session that we had this morning, and I think these interim guidelines are just going to be crucial for us to get a grip on. And I was not here when those went in place in 2007, but I do think that the upper basin states didn't get good end of the deal on that. I am a little concerned about the demand management, especially as we move forward and the rest, and because seems to be in my rancher mentality that demand management is just another word for buy and dry or fallow and rest, and so I'm worried about that. I think the river district will have to get into being more of a advocate or whatever for forest management. We've said, I think every county, we had a big fire in our county again last year too. And again, and all of these affect our watersheds and the rest. And we're dealing now with, we add climate change and global warming or whatever you want to call it. And then you add on, I believe, bad forest management in the past, in the last 50 years, 60 years, and we have what we are and the rest. And so we used to have an asbestos forest here, and it's no longer here. So it's not asbestos anymore. So the other thing I really figure on that we need to stay abreast of, and I've mentioned this a couple times, this DNR funding as well, and I think it was brought up earlier too. There's this, and I asked Russell George the other night at our roundtable meeting, so with the oil and gas basically funding the DNR, and now all that stuff's going away, or it's on hold, or we're basically not doing that. How is the state, and we need to be advocates to help the state figure out how we're going to be able to fund DNR and do the stuff that they need to do for us. And so I just want to bring that up as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Chandler Henry.
Hi, everybody. Same old refrain here. I guess drought is the big issue for us with our recreation economy and also our ag economy. People are very concerned. The resort communities, between COVID and lack of snow, are really suffering. So that is an issue for us. Speaking of ag, we're looking for ways to try and do a better job of supporting our agricultural producers. We are, for the first time, and I don't know why this hadn't been done in the past, but we are funding the Conservation District. They've been doing a great job working with the ranching community and working with NRCS and getting some water projects going out on the land, mostly up the Colorado River. That's where most of our ranching community is, little bits and pieces there, but it's mostly the Colorado River, and they're feeling pressure from the overuse of recreation on the river, especially this last summer, that affected their operations. Aurora continues to pursue the new Trans Mountain diversion, so we're keeping an eye on that, doing work to make sure that we're in a good spot with our 1041 regulations. And part of what they're proposing is to move wilderness boundaries. So that's a pretty big push from Aurora. So that's really on our radar. I really like the idea of the River District becoming more active in forest health. I think that's huge for water, both quality and quantity issues. And unfortunately, a big deal in Eagle County too, is we had the Lake Christine fire, and then last year the Grizzly Creek fire. And lastly, we are spending a lot of time on our vaccination clinics. We are almost to the end of vaccinating the 70+ crowd, which is really exciting for us. And we did allocate $3 million of reserve funds to go directly to small businesses. We call it a bridge grant loan, or not loan, it's a grant to try and help those businesses survive and keep the doors open post-COVID. So that's Eagle County report.
Thank you very much. Ouray County, same story as everybody else. It's really dry. I'm looking out at grass where usually there would be snow this time of year. And so I think, again, it highlights, as Director Vandenbrink has pointed out so many times, the importance of storage. I think certainly someone else said today, it's almost impossible to have too much storage in Colorado. And especially during these times, we need to be able to store it in high runoff years for use in years that are like this. And we also have forest health concerns, again, like many other people. I do want to let you know in that vein that Club 20, many of you are members, but you don't have to be a member to attend the Club 20 policy committees. And on March 11th, we will be doing a virtual policy committee meeting, the winter committee meetings. Water and Public Lands are joining their time to do a piece on forest health. And we're going to have some good speakers. We will also have the separate water meeting following that. But you might put that on your calendars and look at the Club 20 website for information about that agenda and registration. And then I would also echo Director Alvey's observation that it's very difficult in this COVID situation for water user groups to meet, have annual meetings and get things done. The technology isn't always readily available to members. And so, I think we will be playing catch up here for a while in terms of just getting people organized and communicating again. That's all I had. And I am looking at our calendar, at our agenda. We obviously are running a bit behind schedule. Nevertheless, we're going to go ahead and take a 10-minute break right now. Let's be back at 11, and then we will dig into the policy discussion. All right? Thanks. Andy, do you want to tee that up?
Sure, I'll tee that up. I believe Zane Kessler, if he'll turn on his camera, is going to run this discussion. Good morning, Zane.
Good morning, everybody. Thanks for having me. All right. Well, we'll just dive right in if President Whitmore is ready to move forward.
Yes, please. Let's get at it.
Zane, let me just give a quick overview, and I think many of you saw this in the memo. Our hope is that well, number one, we think the policies are very important. Staff and hopefully the board rely upon those policies to guide our actions and let the public know where we stand. We think the discussion on an annual basis of policies is important as well, but we do want to try to keep the discussion focused on substantive issues. And so our staff has reviewed these policies for anything substantive that we think should be changed. I think in this go around, you'll find very little that we thought needed to be changed from that perspective, but we really welcome substantive suggestions, direction from the board. In the past, I know we've spent some time dealing with grammatical nuances, and I'm not sure that that's the best use of all of your time. So if you have suggestions about out of place commas or semicolons, I'd be happy to have you just email those to Zane and maybe not spend the entire board's meeting on things that aren't major substantive issues. And I just need to, I want to be respectful of your time. I want to make sure we have these policies correct. But I do want to encourage productive use of everybody's time. So with that, I'll turn it over to Zane. Sorry, Zane.
Thanks, Andy. Thank you, President Whitmore. Yeah, as Andy alluded to, the board typically reviews about 1/3 of the River District's existing policy statements each year, so that policy statements are reviewed on a rotating 3-year basis. The process begins with this first quarterly board meeting of each year. And under the adopted processes or process that the board has held for a long time, a policy needs to be on the board's agenda for at least 2 quarterly meetings before you take final action to adopt or re-adopt a policy. I have spent a lot of time talking with Andy and Audrey and others about this, and we as staff truly do believe that the annual policy review is an important opportunity for directors to consider and request drafting of new policy ideas. Based on what we heard from certain board members yesterday, I expect that the board, or I expect that staff will review in the coming weeks and months leading up to the April quarterly meeting the need for a policy related to a water speculation, or related to water speculation and some of the issues we're seeing not only on the western slope but throughout the state on that topic. Included in your packet are 5 policies due for triennial review this year. Those include agricultural water use, Colorado River Storage Project Act, Colorado's prior appropriations doctrine, federal water rights, and lastly, the Upper Colorado River Recovery Program. At first glance, staff does not see any need for major overhaul of any of these 5, but we want to take an opportunity to hear from you today, and then also spend some time internally working with staff from each wing of the district, from technical staff, administration, or administrative and operations, as well as from council and external affairs, to review these and come back to you in April with some suggested revisions. So I expect we will initiate that internal review in the coming weeks, and I'm more than open to hear your input today, and happy to go through these one by one if you would like, but it's really at the board's discretion, and please know that we'll be working internally to try and identify ways to improve these policies for your review and potential adoption as early as April.
Okay, so let's take agricultural first. Does anyone have some substantive, again, heeding Andy's admonition, does anyone have any substantive revisions or suggestions?
Marty, I would like to make one.
Okay, go for it, Director.
Okay, I hope this is substantive, and I'm throwing it out there as a concern that I have, given the conversations over the last year surrounding demand management and possible compact administration. I keep hearing brought up the idea that technically pre-compact water rights aren't exempt from curtailment. That might not be necessarily true, and just I don't know whether it would be in the agricultural section or some other section, but it appears to me that we need to develop a policy of where we stand on that. And I was looking at maybe the second bullet point under agriculture, maybe strengthening that or including some kind of a statement in that part. I don't have any words and I don't want to get into wordsmithing anyway. I'm more throwing this out there if other directors and staff agree with me, but it seems like something on the tune of that the River District policy would be to, I know we want positive statements, but rather than that second bullet point reading like it does, something sort of like that the River District will oppose any legislative or administrative actions that erode the sanctity of pre-compact water rights from being curtailed. Throwing that out there, I know Andy's probably flaunching at the bit here, but if anyone else feels like we need to maybe start taking a stand on that topic, I'd like to hear it back.
Okay, does anybody else want to chime in on that one? Again, the concept of pre-compact rights is in bullet 2. Director Gray is suggesting that we strengthen that bullet, but has not proposed specific language. Director Curry.
Thank you. I support Director Gray's recommendation.
Okay. Yes, Director Chandler Henry.
Yeah, I support that too. I think it's a great add and maybe gives us some sideboards as demand management wobbles its way forward, to have some bright red lines that that the River District would oppose, even considering.
Okay. Is there anybody with a different perspective? Okay. I'm not seeing anyone jump. Oh, yes, Director Aquafresca. Sorry, missed your hand there.
I was going to raise a different topic.
Okay, let's just
Then
make sure. No, let me hold that thought. Is there anyone else who wants to weigh in on Director Gray's suggestion or who disagrees with asking staff to try and come up with a proposal for strengthening bullet 2? I'm not seeing any, so I think that's direction to staff to craft perhaps something that would strengthen that bullet on pre-compact rights protection. Okay, Director Aquafresca.
Thank you. I wanted to thank Zane for picking up on the fact that yesterday the board talked about having specific policy language regarding water speculation. And that would be an alternative to having to comb through our existing policies and try to find something that alluded to that. So something very specific. Yes, I wanted to ask Zane and others, which category do you think a strong anti-speculation policy statement would belong? Would it belong in one of these 5 that we're reviewing today, or one of the other 10, I believe it is?
Or it may need to stand alone. But Zane, do you want to respond to that?
Right. I think that will certainly be part of an internal staff review with Counsel and Andy and Audrey and others. But I think there may be points, certainly I think there's merit in having a standalone anti-water speculation policy, but it may be a hybrid approach that includes the creation of a standalone while also trying to find ways in agricultural water use policy statement or others to weave in a sense of the board's concern about this issue.
I like that. And perhaps a standalone would also be the place where the board could articulate its policy regarding demand management when we settle on one. Thank you.
Okay, let's look again at the agricultural policy. Are there any other substantive issues or points that we want to add or refine or subtract? I'm not seeing anything. Anyone raising their hand or wanting to be heard on that? So should we move on to Colorado River Storage Projects Act policy? This one, as you recall, we refined 3 years ago. We worked very hard on refining the language, but as always, we're open to reviewing these so that we can further refine if anyone sees something that they think is not quite as it should be. Does anyone have anything on this policy? Okay, I'm not.
I would flag, Madam President, I would flag that one point of research for this policy that staff will be diving into is potential impacts of the 07 interim guideline renegotiations, and whether or not we need to specifically craft amendments to this policy that position us well for that discussion, which will be ongoing in the next 3 years.
Okay, thank you very much, Zane. You'll come back to us with recommendations on that. As you'll recall, 3 years ago, part of what we really wanted to emphasize was that there are still projects that were authorized but have not been funded that perhaps are viable, and we want to continue to encourage funding those for construction.
Right.
Okay, I'm not seeing anything else on this one, so can we move down to prior appropriation?
Okay.
And again, is there anything in this that we want to see changed, added, subtracted, refined? I think we did some pretty good work 3 years ago. It doesn't seem like anyone's just terribly upset or concerned about that one either. So let's move to federal water rights. There were minor staff proposed revision in this. Anything else that anyone sees that needs attention? Okay, again, I'm not seeing anyone. So let's move to the Upper Colorado River Recovery Program. And I didn't see any staff proposed revisions in this one. So any directors? Yes, Director Curry.
Thank you. I think Director Haas and I raised our hand at the exact same time.
My apologies.
Director
Director Haas, you're next.
So there is a mention of funding in the policy that I saw, but I think from what I'm hearing, there could be a risk to the federal funding for the program. And I don't know if we want to say, hopefully this is viewed as a substantive comment, that we support adequate funding for the program, because the state might have to pick up some of this if the new administration backs off a little bit. And I know, it's hard to say right now what the new administration will do, but do we want to make it clear that we would also support other funding mechanisms to make sure that the program is adequately funded into the future?
Director Curry, is the language in the second bullet from the bottom not adequate for that?
Let me look. Including the adequate funding language there.
Right. Do you think it needs to be more robust?
I thought it needed to be, because I read that to be more oriented towards specific Section 7 consultations. And I'm not sure. I guess what I'm talking about is a bigger picture view, where if this federal role starts to diminish, then the state is going to be looked at, and our budget situation. But I would like to see that strengthened a little bit.
Okay. Director Haas.
Thank you, Madam President. I think the other issue that I was wondering if Kathleen would raise is that the recovery program the Upper Basin Recovery Program is supposed to sunset in 2023. So what is the policy of this organization in terms of seeing that extended, since it does cover a lot of water rights? And just wondering if you've thought about that, since it'll come due. We'll have to be engaged in those conversations between now and the next time this would come up.
Good point. Yes. And that dovetails with the funding issue as well.
Yep.
Zane?
This is one where this is of the 5 that we're reviewing today. I think this is the one that will probably see the most revisions and recommendations for improvement from staff. Of course, the conversations with regards to the sunset of the existing program and creation of a new program are fluid. we'll do our best to pin it down as much as possible while also allowing flexibility for drawing our desires and our goals for a program that will come into existence well after this policy is adopted. Does that make sense?
If I can make a suggestion on this, I think the directors make a great point. With your permission, I would schedule a discussion, a fairly in-depth discussion on the recovery program for the April meeting. We'll probably bring in some speakers to present on the status of the 2023 discussions and the funding issues, as well as what the future looks like beyond that. And if that works for you, we'll intend to bring folks in to talk about that.
I think that sounds like an excellent suggestion, Andy. As you'll recall, 3 years ago when we looked at this policy, some of the concerns expressed had to do with, will we ever recover the species, and will any of them be delisted, and what do those numbers look like? So maybe when you're looking at the presentation for April, maybe you could also cover some of those issues as well.
So sure, and I know the Tom Chart with the Fish and Wildlife Service is probably the best person to cover that, and I've seen a presentation by him recently at the UCRC that I think was very helpful. So we'll see if we can't invite him and bring him in, and then talk about kind of the water user perspective in Colorado as to where we're headed with that discussion. So
perfect. Does anyone have anything to add to that, or anything that they want to make sure Andy covers for that piece of the agenda in April?
Well, I would just ask that as part of that conversation, hearing about some of the alternatives, is it just, I've heard different things, that it could just be we just extend the program, or it could be that it's a relatively restructured new kind of program with new funding sources. So it'd be great to hear some of those alternatives.
Great, thank you. We'll look forward to a more in-depth discussion in April. Okay, unless anyone has anything else on those 5 policies, we will move on to external affairs. Zane, Eleanor?
I'm here. I'm waiting
Okay.
on the rest of the team. Are you guys on?
There we go.
we see Eleanor. We're waiting for Alicia, if I'm not mistaken. And
I am here.
there we go. All right.
Great. Well, thank you all. I think since we have a few new board members, why don't we just go through and introduce ourselves. I'm Zane Kessler. I'm the Director of Government Relations and also an active member of the EA team. Alicia?
I am Alicia Frederick, the Director of Information and Outreach.
I'm Eleanor Hassenbeck. I'm the Communications and Policy Fellow, so I help out other folks on the EA team, and I am in a temporary position that will be ending soonish.
Great. Thanks, Eleanor, and thanks, Alicia. I'll start off by just giving a quick overview of what we saw as a very successful year for the External Affairs team in 2020, as well as outlining a few of the goals that are included in your memo for the year to come. Last year was a great year for EA and for the district as a whole. I think a lot of the work that we did built on the direction that the board provided us within the strategic plan, as well as conversations and input we received during INO subcommittee meetings. We were able to, last year alone, significantly expand our presence on new media, social media, and traditional media. We had a great presence in newspapers, both within the district and regionally and nationally. We expanded our radio presence for the first time to include counties in each corner of the district. Historically, we had done some radio underwriting on public radio and elsewhere, but we were able to expand to traditional radio stations as well. Again, from Ouray all the way up to Rio Blanco County, and from Mesa County all the way to Summit. And that, coupled with our development of new branding and new content over the last year or two, I think really came together quite well. For the first time, we were hearing feedback from friends on the street and seeing the interactions, literally tens of thousands of interactions with our constituents in communities that we serve. And for the first time, I think a lot of the typical members of the public who were unaware of who the River District was and the importance of the work we do really started to see us more regularly on their media, whether that be traditional or social media. Of course, all of that, the positive name recognition, the branding work, being out there on the airwaves certainly helped in an indirect way with our success at the ballot box on Measure 7A. And I think we as a team take great pride in knowing that we were able to help with that. So 2020 was a great year of success for us. 2021, we're going to be really kind of trying to build on and continue to expand the work that we did last year. Included in your packet are the team's goals for 2021. A few of those that I would point out is working to really kind of develop bilateral communications with our municipalities and our counties in the district, centered primarily on the new partnership funding program, but also opening up those lines of communication so that we can have a better sense of what the individual needs of communities are throughout the district. We'll also continue to maintain close working relationships with West Slope legislators. We'll be building or doing our best to continue to build a community of followers online where we can work to educate and inform them of key issues as they arise. One other key area for our work in the coming year is to work and try and connect those water supply issues and concerns that we're seeing with climate change. And in my job on the EA team, there's a direct policy component there, but there's also, I think, for the rest of the EA team, a direct communications component that's going to be important. And we look forward to working with the board on that in the months to come. So with that, I will turn it over to Alicia, who's going to talk a little bit about some of our key messages for the year to come.
Sure. I think we have a question from Steve. Do you want to take that real quick?
Sure.
Director Alcafresca, I apologize. You're muted.
Yes, go ahead.
On the topic of elected officials, I wanted to suggest that staff draft thank you letters to a handful of elected officials that really went to bat for us on 7A. We have 2 state representatives here in this county that really went out on a political limb and made a strong appeal, a very strong appeal to voters to support 7A, as well as we have 2 county commissioners that did the same thing. And I'd recommend that you get back in touch with me, you may already know, but I'll point out who those elected officials were specifically, and that the letter, the thank you letter, be signed by our board president and the respective director from that part of our district. Thank you.
Very good point, Steve.
Yeah, Steve, we can certainly do that. I would point out that if we're doing that, that will be 14 letters going to county commissions, and in addition to the elected representatives from the Grand Valley, we had great support from our state delegation on that elsewhere. We can certainly do that. It will probably take staff a little bit of time to get that together, but excellent point. So
I would flag that in my role as government relations director, I've been engaged with many of those, all of the members of the West Slope delegation in the state assembly, that many of whom were very helpful on 7A, and we have expressed our appreciation. But I do think you raise a good point, Steve. And one other thing that we're planning for the coming weeks is something we try to do on an annual basis, is to all elected officials in the district send an annual update or a letter to them. The focus of this year's correspondence will likely be the PPFP, the funding program, and making sure they know where they can point our shared constituents find information on that. But maybe I can find a way to weave in our appreciation for their support on 7A into that correspondence as well.
Seems like a great way to handle it. Anyone else? Okay.
Okay, I'll just hit on the next portion of our memo talks about messages. In 2020, we found our voice and created some very strategic messages that we used in all of our communications. And we will continue to use similar messages that we used in 2020 moving forward in 2021, recognizing that we definitely have to do a good job about making sure that people are aware of the PPFP program and creating messages and information out there for folks to have a good understanding of that program. In terms of actual outreach this year, we do plan on having Water with Your Lunch events as we have had in the past. We are planning on having a partnership projects funding program webinar in February. The expected date right now is February 10th. That webinar will allow people to log on and learn more about the program, how to apply, all of the qualification information. And that's something that we'll be working closely with Andy on. And hopefully, as we get a project manager, we will be able to work with them and get them out into the public eye, promoting the program. There are other outreach programming that the River District will be focusing on this year listed in the memo. I won't get too deep there. As Zane stated, threats to us of water, including impacts of climate, is going to be a main shift for us to start speaking on. Virtual events and the ability to adapt to hybrid events are something that we will be playing with all year long. Of course, with COVID, it's not clear what we're going to be able to do in person with folks, which we always want to have in-person events, but our online events seem to be still a hit, and we are getting people in the seats listening to what we have to say. So that's big for us. As we look at our outreach planning, we will just continue to be as flexible as possible when planning those events. I will move on to our digital outreach and let Eleanor speak on that.
The theme on digital outreach is very similar to the rest of our goals. We were very, very successful last year. We almost quadrupled our social media following and engagement. So we just want to build on that success and keep up with consistent posting. So I just have to remind you that if you don't like and follow the River District on whatever social media platforms you use, please do. The other exciting thing in the digital realm is the new website. We're planning to launch a new website. The big goal there being to make it more user-friendly, both for the public, to make it easier to find our stories, publications that the tech staff are working on, and to make it easier for us to update it on the back end so that we can always have up-to-date information online. Our newsletters were also a big success in the last year. We're constantly trying to tweak our weekly newsletter. So if you have suggestions there, we're just making improvements as we find them. But if there's something that rises to top of mind there, let us know and we'll see if we can implement it.
I might just, can I just interrupt a couple of things? Just make sure that you've got all the new county commissioners in the various counties. We've had quite a bit of turnover in commissioners in all 15 counties, I think, or at least in quite a few of them. And I think it would just be useful if you'd reach out to get that contact information rather than wait for them to figure out that maybe they want to plug in.
We are in the process of updating that list right now with the help of admin staff. Lizzie has taken that on the last 2 years and has done a great job helping us update that. It certainly is not easy. It requires a lot of research, and unfortunately, their CCI and CML no longer offer that what they used, their desk guides, which used to be a perfect go-to place for all new elected officials. But we do that in-house, and we're already working to update that list. So.
And can I also just say, you know, you guys have done an amazing job of really responding to the challenges of COVID with the online webinars and Facebook and all of those things. I would just suggest that there still is really no substitute for some up close and personal in-person events, whether that's, you know, State of the River, or it's meetings with boards of county commissioners, or, you know, the annual seminar. I would sure hate to see those all become virtual. And I'm seeing some other nodding heads among the directors. So I don't think there's a lot of disagreement with that.
We miss you guys too.
I'm sorry?
We miss you guys too.
Yes, I think it's definitely our intention to try and get as many in-person events as we can on the calendar for this year, but just recognizing that with COVID, we have to be as fluid as possible, and that we have actually increased numbers on our digital events or online events. So trying to figure out how we can have hybrid events where people can tune in at home and also in person is something that we're exploring too.
Okay.
I do want to take one moment before we move on to state affairs and thank Eleanor Hassenbeck for her work over almost 2 years now. But as a communications and policy fellow, she was very helpful for us on the EA team and really helped to keep us moving forward and expand our game in a real and meaningful way. So this is her last board meeting, most likely. So I wanted to take the opportunity to thank her for all of her work, and she certainly shares in the success that we all enjoyed last year. So
thank you, Eleanor.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure to work with everybody here, although it's been in a lot of little computer squares for most of it.
And
thank you.
Before you move on to state affairs, Zane, if I can just chime in a little bit. I want to thank this team and the obvious missing hole, Jim Pokrant, for the work they did over the last year. It really is tremendous. And I think they were pretty understated in the way they stated the numbers and the way they were able to reach out to people in the last year. You know, I will say that the number of government institutions and nonprofits that reached out to me and mentioned to me that they were trying to catch up to the River District and its virtual presence was really amazing. They adapted incredibly well to the pandemic. They're excited. President Whitmore, I know from sitting in on some meetings, to get back into in-person meetings, but understand that we've also captured a niche that we need to keep.
Absolutely.
And I wanted to mention a couple of things. I think many of you are aware with the retirement of Chris Treese last year, I took over direct management of the EA team during the critical year where we thought we might have a ballot question on the ballot. And I did that through the end of November. Audrey Turner, our chief of operations, is now directly managing that team for the time being. We're in a bit of a period of transition while we are about to hire or put out a job advertisement for another EA team member. So we will have 3 permanent EA team members going forward. What I've done in terms of management, you all aware is I've slid over to some direct management in a co-management situation with Audrey for our tech team, our engineering team. And that has to do with a lot of the very pressing issues that are developing on some of our enterprise assets and making sure that we're, you know, my focus is where it needs to be. On the engineering side, I will, even though we're not in that report, I will just let you know, we're going to bring on the project engineer manager, here hopefully within the next few weeks. We have another retirement, as I think you're all aware, in our engineering staff, which is Ray Tenney. And so we will be replacing that position. We're working on a job description for that. And once we have that person in, my intention is to work with the engineering staff to develop a management model that really optimizes our team's strengths. And you may see a moving around of positions. We've got some ideas on how to do that. I want to make sure we get the right people on the team, and then use those people to manage that team. So, it's not a permanent situation that myself and Audrey are directly managing the tech team or even the EA team. I just want you to know we're engaged in that right now. It's in the long run, I think it will really be great for the district. We've got some really great ideas on how to structure it, and frankly, very excited about the new hires we have on board already, and the additions that we will have in the near future. So, just wanted to let you all be aware of that kind of change in structure. But it's been a great privilege to work with our EA team directly over the last year, because they just really are a fantastic bunch. So turn it back to Zane for state affairs.
Thanks, Andy. All right, Madam President, the state affairs update is relatively easy for us. We're a little behind schedule, so I'll try to be quick. Makeup of the state legislature, there certainly was not a blue wave as many folks expected in November. Democrats maintained their majority in the House. They lost one seat, picked up another. In the Senate, they gained one seat, but really the power structure remains the same. Democrats still, of course, control the executive and legislative branch. So I expect the playing field to be very similar to what we faced last year. We do have a little bit of a shakeup or a couple of new faces in the West Slope or River District delegation with the retirement of Casey Becker, Speaker Becker. The new elected representative for House District 13 will be Judy Amabile. She does, of course, represent parts of Grand County. We'll be working to get her up to speed on our concerns. The other new face in the River District delegation is Senator Cleve Simpson, who, of course, is the general manager of the Rio Grande Water Conservation District, and Senate District 35, which he was elected to, does represent Saguache County. So beyond that, the new leadership in the majority, the new speaker, Alec Garnett, I think we're in a good position to work well with Alec. He has listened to our concerns in the past. One of our two contract lobbyists at the State House maintains close working relationship with Alec. And again, Alec has been willing to have us in his office on multiple times as he served as majority leader, and is always willing to listen to our concerns. Can't guarantee he will always side with us, but I do feel positive that we have an open ear in the new speaker. Beyond that, I think the legislative outlook is still unclear in the absence of interim committee hearings. There really has not been much buzz at all about potential bills. I've reached out and I and Jason and Andy have had various conversations with NGOs, with other water users groups and other folks, but other than the couple of ideas that I mentioned in my memo, I don't have anything concrete. And of course, no water bills were introduced in the quick 3 days that the legislature spent in session before adjourning until mid-February.
Okay, thank you. Does anybody have any questions for Zane on state affairs? Yes, Director Aquafresca.
Thank you. Zane, are you hearing any buzz about state funding for the state water plan? It appears that so far, the state's financial support for the water plan has not been successful. And the water plan just cries out for assistance, especially as we continue to suffer year after year of drought.
Thank you, Director Aquafresca. We, of course, hear a lot of buzz about it, but when push comes to shove, and especially when you consider the significant financial challenges that faced the legislature last year, and specifically the Joint Budget Committee, the hard decisions they had to make, there was not much hope of getting anything beyond just the very bare bones essentials funded by JBC and the rest of the Assembly. We continue to meet with them. Senator Rankin, of course, is an active member of the JBC and a powerful member of the JBC. Water is a priority for him and for others, but we are competing with other, I'll say, bigger and more hungry mouths at the moment. I do worry, as this board expressed some concern as well, that certain members of the legislature believe that Proposition DD gave us what we needed. It's our job now to continue to try and inform them that that's not the case, and continued investment will be necessary in the years to come.
Thanks for doing that.
Okay, I don't see anybody else. Zane, why don't you move into the federal affairs?
Great, thank you, Madam President. Well, as many of us saw in our second screen or the TV in the background, President Joe Biden was sworn in as the 46th President of the United States by Supreme Court Chief Justice John Roberts earlier this morning. We've seen a lot of reporting in recent days on what President Biden plans to do in his first 100 days in office. You know, these first couple of days, we expect a lot of executive orders. And, you know, one thing that a number of our associations and others are already talking about online and via email is where the president and his administration are going to go on key areas such as reversing the Trump administration's deregulatory agenda, Biden's intent to restore public land protections, as well as the climate change policy conversation, which was a clear priority for Biden on the campaign. We're again getting a clearer sense, but I would expect three areas that we'll be watching in these early days is intent of the administration to review and potentially change Waters of the United States, Endangered Species Act, Critical Habitat, and National Environmental Protection Act. So those are three areas we're watching as of now, now that he is seated, and we'll start seeing movement today potentially. Beyond that, the transition is underway for new members of the delegation. In your memo, I included a list of new staff members, or the recently announced staff members for Representative Lauren Boebert. Since this memo was written, newly elected U.S. Senator John Hickenlooper also announced a number of key hires. Because those weren't in your memo, I'll just list two that jumped out to me. Sarah McCarthy will be the Western Regional Director for Senator Hickenlooper's office, based out of Grand Junction. Sarah is a West Slope native. She's worked for, in the past, Conservation Colorado, as well as Colorado Outdoor Business Alliance. The Senator's State Director with an indirect tie to the West Slope will be Shad Murab. Shad was the former Chief of Staff to the Colorado Senate Democrats, and also Government Affairs Manager for the Secretary of State, Griswold. Shad is married to State Senator Kerry Donovan. There's the indirect tie I mentioned earlier. And then that's really it on the staff transitions. I think we've seen a lot of buzz about key appointments at the federal level. You know, we of course saw former Representative Deb Haaland nominated for Secretary of the Interior. We've seen a lot of conversation about potential appointments to Bureau of Reclamation and assistant secretarial positions within Interior. Not a whole lot to report in concrete there, but we will of course keep you apprised of anything as it's announced. And lastly, I wanted to go back and just touch on the fact that the water community actually had some notable success getting some key issues funded in the COVID superbus legislation that was passed in the waning days of the Trump administration. House Resolution 133 included appropriations bills that have been, well, really stagnant and moving nowhere for a long time, but key water provisions in both the Energy and Water Development and Related Agencies Bill, as well as the Interior Environment and Related Agencies Appropriations. Last thing I would note is we were successful in actually securing some compromise language with our partners, both in the conservation community as well as in the traditional irrigated agricultural community. There was a provision that we've discussed many times in the past that would have allowed NGOs the ability to lead on applications for WaterSmart funding. We and others raised some concerns about allowing NGOs the ability to apply solely for those funds. Many of the NGOs, including the Nature Conservancy, the Audubon Society, Trout Unlimited, and others, worked on compromise language with us and with the Family Farm Alliance to reach a compromise in which we would, those NGOs would be working with the existing eligible applicants in partnership with us to move forward on WaterSmart projects. So with that, I'll wrap up federal affairs and thank you for your time and happy to answer any questions.
Anyone have any questions or comments for Zane? Not seeing anything,
Oh,
so.
sorry, President.
Yes.
I have one question. Yeah.
Oh,
thanks.
sorry, Director Haas.
No worries. Zane, what are you hearing about wildfire mitigation and healthy forests? Is that, I mean, this last year in the West was just, you know, so powerful in terms of the visuals. And I'm just wondering if that's, you mentioned some of the other priorities, is that on the radar screen of this administration?
It certainly is. I think I know there is a concerted effort by some to have some dollars for wildfire mitigation included in an infrastructure package. Going forward, every week from now until we see something could be infrastructure week. And so there's a lot of folks trying to get their priorities included. The traditional water advocacy entities are also picking up the baton on wildfire mitigation and trying to get that included in any sort of omnibus infrastructure package. Beyond that, I'd be happy to dig up additional info and send out an update to the board if that would be helpful.
Great, thanks. Yeah, might be helpful at some point.
Zane, I think there will be a lot of new information available and probably a lot of things that might be useful in an email to everybody or something prior to the April meeting. I suspect there'll be a lot of new happenings.
Certainly will be.
Okay, Andy, it looks like we're ready for project operations and updates.
We are. Thank you very much, Madam President. If we can bring in Hunter Ozzie, our senior engineers at the district. Hunter, if you want to go ahead and take these action items, and we have a few quick action items and then a discussion. So,
great. Thanks, Andy, and thanks, directors. So I've got two memos. The first memo is on Elkhead and Wolford Mountain Reservoir updates. The first item in that memo is just a quick update on the rec area at Wolford. This is the first year that Pass Creek Investments has acted as the concessionaire at the recreation area. This has been an unusual year, to say the least, for them to take this on and figure out how to do that work, but they've taken it in stride and they've done a great job. And it ended up being a very busy year once we opened up the rec area. And actually this year represents the biggest year of revenue for the River District from the recreation area and the recreation area's history. And that's for a couple of reasons, to a small degree because it was such a busy year with people trying to get out and social distance. But more than that, the River District increased the fees at the recreation area. So it costs a little bit more to camp and use the recreation area. And secondly, because the contract with the concessionaire was adjusted so that we get a larger portion of the revenues. But with the fee increase, it's still a viable business for the concession area. But this year we generated about $176,000 from the rec area compared to about $48,000 last year. So a nearly fourfold increase in River District revenue. So thought that was some exciting news that I'd share with everybody. The next item is for weed management at both Wolford and Elkhead. Staff solicited proposals. We received one proposal from EcoRx. EcoRx is our current weed management provider. We've always been satisfied with their product, and honestly, it's a difficult job. There's a lot of really remote areas, so we're happy to see that they're still willing to do it. So we're recommending that we continue with that contract at Wolford. They're also the weed manager at Elkhead Reservoir, and we are recommending that we continue to work with them there. And then lastly, in that memo is a recommendation for concrete repair at Wolford. Just the nature of aging infrastructure, there's some issues with some concrete that needs some work. This comes up on our dam safety inspections with the dam safety office. There's some repair that's needed for the service spillway, the emergency spillway, and some smaller structures at the dam. We advertised that. We got an offer from BNRW Construction. We've actually had some experience with them before at Elkhead Reservoir. We were very satisfied with their work, so we're recommending that we enter into contract with them for concrete repair. And that's everything on that memo.
Would you like us to go ahead and take action on those 3 items?
That would be greatly appreciated.
All right, you've got the memo, you've heard staff's recommendation. There are, the first is approval of contract for reed control at Wolford Mountain Reservoir. Is there a motion to approve?
Move staff.
So moved.
Recommendation.
Moved by Alvy, second.
Aqua Fresca.
Aqua Fresca, moved and seconded. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Madam Chair?
Aye. Yes.
Real quickly, I just wanted to make sure that that motion included the fact, since these are 5-year contracts, that's subject to your annual appropriations.
Thank you very much.
You're
Appreciate that clarification. Okay, we're on item I, weed control at Wolford Mountain. The motion is for staff recommendation. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed, nay. Motion carries. How about the contract with weed control at Elkhead Reservoir? Is there a motion for staff recommendation?
So moved, Vandenbrink.
Thank you. Second?
Second, Hazard.
Thank you. So moved by Vandenbrink, second by Hazard. Staff recommendation on weed control at Elkhead Reservoir. And Jason, I assume with the same information that it's a 5-year contract, but it is subject to annual appropriations.
Thank you.
Okay, all those in favor, aye.
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 Aye. Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries. And finally, the staff recommendation for B&RW Construction for concrete repairs at Wolford. Any motion on that?
So moved, Vandenbrink.
Thank you. Moved by Vandenbrink, second.
Seconded by Merritt.
Second, Merritt. Moved and seconded to staff recommendation. All those in favor, aye.
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 Opposed, nay. Okay, again, that has passed. So we've got those 3 action items taken care of. Hunter, do you want to talk about the dam safety update?
Yes, thank you, President Whitmore. Before I get into the dam safety evaluation we performed last year, I thought it would be helpful to provide a little bit of background, sort of a refresher for current for directors, and also an introduction for some of our new directors on the dam and the design. So if you don't mind, may I be allowed to share my screen?
Sounds like a good plan. Thank you.
Yeah.
Is that
Lori,
Audrey?
if you can please make Hunter a co-host, that would be fantastic. We're working on that, Hunter, at the moment. Lori? Hey, Lori.
Yes, sir.
Can you make
I'm
Hunter
looking
a
for Hunter.
co-host? Yep,
Yes,
please.
it is done, sir.
Okay, Hunter, go for it.
Right, here we go. All right, can folks see that, the aerial photo of the dam?
Mhm.
Okay, perfect. So this is an aerial photo of the dam. It's on the upstream side of the dam is Wolford Mountain Reservoir. That's a 66,000 acre foot reservoir. Downstream of the dam is Muddy Creek, a few miles upstream of Kremling in the confluence with the Colorado River. The dam crest itself is about 1,700 feet long and about 140 feet tall at the tallest point from the historic stream channel to the top of the dam there. There's three ways that we can release water from the dam. The first of those is through a 800 foot long, 8-foot diameter conduit. You can also see in the aerial photo here, there's the dam tower underwater there. There's a series of gates that allow us to release water through the conduit. The second way we're able to release water downstream is via the service spillway. So that's a 150 foot long concrete spillway where as the reservoir rises and it reaches the sill of that spillway, it spills over safely downstream. And then lastly, there's an emergency spillway where in a truly extreme situation, if you had a major flood, it would release water through the emergency spillway and prevent overtopping of the dam. This is another way to look at the dam. It's a 3D visualization of the dam, but it gives you a little bit of a sense of what's underneath the dam and underwater. This is that tower there that has a series of gates. There's the conduit that goes through the dam, terminates at the outlet works where we have a number of valves that allow us to throttle the water and control releases downstream. We got the service spillway over here. And then the main reason I wanted to show this visualization is that there's this drain system. So all dams leak. Ritschsrd Dam leaks a little bit, but we have a drain system in place that allows water that leaks through the dam to be safely captured and moved downstream. This is another view of the dam. It's a cross-section view. You can think of this, it's kind of like cutting the dam in half perpendicular to the crest of the dam, so you can see how the dam is constructed. On the left here is the reservoir. On the right would be Muddy Creek and the outlet works. I'm gonna sort of lump together the parts of the reservoir, or excuse me, the parts of the dam just for simplicity into four primary parts. The first of those is the clay core. This is a really critical part of the dam because this is the part of the dam that's impervious and prevents water from flowing through the dam downstream. The clay core is in the middle, it's impervious, and then on either side of that is the shells of the dam. So the clay core doesn't really have enough structure to hold back the reservoir, which is why you have these large shells on either side of the clay core to provide that structure. This is considered a rock fill embankment dam because these shells are made out of compacted shale that was gathered on site. And then there's a couple of features of the dam I want to talk about that are modern dam safety features. So the first of those is the filter that's just downstream of the clay core. So the filter is there to prevent erosion of the clay core. So it works by if there was ever a scenario where water was flowing through the clay core and creating erosion within the clay, the filter is just downstream and would capture those clay particles and filter out the clay particles until the filter became plugged and ultimately stop that erosion. And then just downstream of the filter is the drain. I showed that image earlier showing all the system of pipes that move water downstream. Well, that's just downstream of the filter. So it captures that water and moves it safely downstream so that you don't saturate the shell, and you can still have that seeping. And then this is the last visualization of the dam I want to show, and really just show some primary components of the dam. This is basically looking at the dam as if you're standing downstream of the dam, looking back upstream. On the left and right, you have the abutments or the wings of the dam. And then in the middle of the dam, you have this main valley portion. So this red line is basically the bedrock where they excavated down to. In between that and the top is the crest of the dam. So you've got the dam in there. And I bring this up because in the report that I'll be talking about in a few minutes, they point to this area here, the transition between those abutments and the main valley portion of the dam is being an area of concern. So just wanted to give you a sense of where that is when I talk about it in just a few minutes. So that's it for the PowerPoint. Now to talk through that memo, let me pull back up the Zoom meeting. So the memo describes the CDSC report overview.
Hunter, if I can interrupt, could you maybe stop sharing your screen so that
oh, sorry,
Whitmore can see everybody else? Perfect, thank you.
Is that it? All right. So the report is based on the Dam Safety Office's template for these exercises. They call it the CDSE report or the Comprehensive Dam Safety Evaluation report. You'll recall that we've gone through some similar exercises in the past, most recently in 2016. In 2020, we did another one of these exercises where we convened 3 experts, truly experts in the field. We also involved, of course, the staff of the River District, Denver Water, the Dam Safety Office, and we also hired a facilitator to help us through this process. There's two key findings from the report. It's with the appendices, the report is several hundred pages long, so I'm really condensing it here, but there's 2 primary key findings that I want to point to. One of those is the report finds that there's a higher risk of dam failure than was determined in prior assessments. So the 2020 report says that there's about a 1 in 10,000 chance of dam failure in any given year. That number is basically the same rate of failure as dams prior to modern dam safety advancements. A big caveat to that is that while they say there's a higher risk of dam failure, there's a poor level of confidence in the assessment. So higher risk, but a very low sense of confidence in that estimated risk. Another key finding in the report is something that they refer to in the report as damage states. And that's basically an event that doesn't result in dam failure. It doesn't pose a risk to the public, or doesn't mean that you're going to flood downstream communities or anything extreme like that, but it's a scenario that still has adverse impacts. So an example is if River District staff identified a problem at the dam related to settlement, which necessitated storage restrictions or remediations. So in that scenario, you're not talking about dam failure or a public health or safety risk, but you are talking about impacting the ability to release water downstream and fulfill the purpose of the reservoir. The report estimates that the likelihood of that sort of incident is extremely high. So those are the 2 key findings: higher dam failure risk with a low confidence, and high risk of those damage states that don't result in dams public health problems. There's also a section of the report that talks about comparing this report findings to previous report findings. So in 2016, that group estimated that the risk of failure in any given year is 1 in 1 billion. So a very small chance of dam failure estimated in 2016, compared to this year saying that there's a 1 in 10,000 chance of dam failure. That's a huge discrepancy. Another way to look at that is that the 2020 group estimated the risk of dam failure is about 100,000 times more likely than the 2016 group estimated. To be honest with you, it's a little hard to reconcile discrepancy, but the report does provide a couple explanations for it. One of those is an increased estimated likelihood of cracking, and especially at those abutment main valley transition areas. So the concern is that at that main valley area, that area where the dam is the highest is deforming at a faster rate than the abutments. So you have a transition area there where there's higher deformation rates compared to the areas next to it, and there's a concern about increased stress at that area. A second reason that they give for that discrepancy is that the 2020 group has less confidence in the ability of that sand filter to stop erosion. So I mentioned earlier that the sand filter works by capturing those clay particles, plugging up, and preventing further erosion. Well, there's a concern that if there is erosion in the core, that the sand filter that we have might not capture those particles because it's too coarse, and some of those clay particles might actually move through and just travel downstream through the sand filter. We're looking into that, and I'll talk about that more in just a little bit. The report offers a number of recommendations. It's notable that there's no recommendation in the report that we go out and rehabilitate the dam. There's no recommendation to start a construction project tomorrow. There are a number of recommendations related to reducing uncertainty, and also actions that we can implement to reduce the risk to the public. So actions to reduce uncertainty, one of those is what's called filter testing. So we talked about how there's that concern that the filter wouldn't capture those clay particles. Well, we went out to the dam, we excavated some of the sand filter that was installed. We also have some clay samples from previous drilling, and we've taken those samples to a laboratory in Denver, and they're going to do some analysis. I won't get into it, but basically just to see if the sand filter will capture those particles, and is it actually a well-designed filter. There's also some recommendations to increase monitoring. So we're planning a comprehensive survey program to be able to allow us to have a closer look at the dam. That might involve LiDAR or satellite data collection. We'll be taking a closer look at the dam. There's also recommendations for additional instrumentation. We might be going out and drilling some more samples, but there's a number of recommendations for that we're actively working on. There's also actions that we can implement to reduce risk to the public. So one of those is refining our emergency preparedness. We're working on some of our emergency plans now. We're also going to be further coordinating with local emergency managers, so people at the city, or excuse me, the town of Kremling and the county. We currently have some stockpiled materials at the dam, but we'll be increasing some of those stockpiles. We're also going to be implementing a voluntary reduced normal operating pool. So what I mean by that is we're going to be keeping the reservoir about 10 feet down from the sill of the service spillway. So to the extent we can, we'll try to prevent the reservoir from spilling this year. And in some years, that's just not possible. If inflow exceeds our ability to release water, that's not going to be possible. But this year is shaping up to be a year where we will be able to do that. One thing to note on this is that by keeping it 10 feet down at the beginning of the year, that means we're going to be that much further down later in the year. So the reservoir may be drawn down significantly, and especially if this ends up being a substitution year. And then the last recommendation from the study is to study dam modification alternatives. So the report doesn't say to implement any modifications to the dam, but it does say to start looking into what our options are down the road if that ends up being necessary. So in summary, the study determined that the dam risk is higher than previously determined, but that determination comes with significant uncertainty. Our additional testing and analysis will hopefully provide some clarity on how we can move forward. We're closely monitoring the situation. We're gathering more information. And once we understand the necessary steps, we'll take action to manage the dam and reservoir to ensure public safety. And then my last and maybe most important point is that our highest priority is public health and safety. with water supply and finances being a second priority. And we're going to move forward as staff with public safety as our highest priority. So that's all I had to say about the memo. I did want to mention that Dana Miller, she's a dam safety engineer with the Dam Safety Office. She's on this call if she wants to chime in, or if anybody has questions for her. Also just wanted to tell her thanks for joining us.
Thank you. Dana, do you have anything you want to add?
I think Hunter did a really nice job of presenting that. There was a lot of effort that went into that risk analysis workshop and discussion. And I think our office feels good about the recommended actions that came out of that. I think you had mentioned public education. We're talking to the town of Kremling tonight, and just continuing to raise public awareness and exercise the emergency action plan as part of, interim reduction of risk. And Hunter, I appreciate how you concluded your discussion there with public safety being, everyone's highest priority. I think we are all on the same page with that. So we're very appreciative of the work and the effort that has gone into all of this over the last several years. And now as there's a transition in the engineering staff, and just thank you for your continued diligence to dam safety, not only at Wolford, but at Elkhead as well. Hunter, I've enjoyed working with you and, kind of coming up to speed together on all this stuff. So I will definitely stay on the call to answer any questions.
Thanks,
Thank you. Thank you very much. Before we move on in Hunter's report, let's finish up the dam safety piece. Does anyone have any questions for Hunter or for Dana Miller? I'm not seeing any hands raised.
President Whitmore, if I may, not a question, but just to mention, I just want the board to be aware that we, given the complexity of the issues that are being faced here, the district, it normally has all of our employees being able to talk about anything with members of the public and press. On this particular complex subject, we have designated an official spokesperson, Audrey Turner, who is our Chief of Operations, and she'll be fielding any questions from the public or press should they have any. And I just want to let the board and the public be aware of that, so that those communications should be directed towards Audrey Turner. So we appreciate that. And I do want to reiterate what both Hunter and Dana have said, and that is that our district and the state and our future partners at Denver Water really are putting public safety first on these discussions and this analysis, and taking the steps necessary to make sure that we understand what's going on up at the dam, and that we increase our confidence in the performance of the materials in that dam. So we do appreciate the collaborative nature of the process that we've been going through with the state and Denver. Very impressed with the variety of experts we've been engaged with on this subject. So thank you.
Thank you, Hunter. That was a great presentation. Dana, thank you very much for also taking time out of your day to be here to comment and to be available for questions. We appreciate it.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Okay, Hunter, if you want to finish your section with water marketing policy.
I actually think we're gonna turn that over to Ian Phillips and
okay.
Hunter is in charge of our assets, but we don't let him touch the marketing side of it.
Or the money.
Or the money.
Thank you.
Just when I thought I was off the hook. All right. Thanks, Madam President. Good afternoon, board. So I'm not going to keep you from lunch too much longer. I just wanted to mention briefly that once again, for the 7th year in a row now, we'll be recommending an increase to the water marketing pricing for the post-2005 contracts at a rate equal to the CPI increase, which is 1.7%. The board does have the ability to increase that price annually up to CPI plus the local growth index. But as I said, the past 6 years, we've just done an increase equal to the CPI, and that's what staff is recommending again for the 2021 pricing.
Okay.
If there's any questions, I'll take those now, or let you
Okay.
guys decide.
Does anyone have any questions for Ian? His memo was, I think, pretty self-explanatory. Any questions for Ian? Okay, if not, is there a motion for staff recommendation?
I move staff recommendation on the marketing rates for the coming year.
Okay, motion by Merritt, second.
Second, Alvy.
Vandenbrink, I'll second it.
All
Or
right,
Tom.
looks like Alvy was seconded it. Okay, so we have a motion and a second for staff recommendation. Is there any discussion? Is there anybody who wants to discuss different rates than those recommended by staff? Seeing no one jump forward, we're going to go ahead and all those in favor, aye.
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 And any opposed, nay. Motion carries, and so we have now approved the water marketing rates for 2021. Ian, thank you so much as always for putting that together for us.
You're very welcome. Thank you.
Andy, I think that brings us to future meetings and any other comments that you might have.
Great. Well, I want to thank the board again. I do unfortunately share your pain with Zoom meetings and certainly long ones. So I know this has been a long one. I appreciate your willingness to do it. I will also just mention that in the 4 meetings that we've now had by Zoom, I think that we're all getting a little bit more functional. Let's hope that we can not exercise this functionality a whole lot longer. But it is helpful to have these meetings, and we appreciate it. Speaking of Zoom meetings, as many of you are aware, we have a tradition of holding bi-weekly meetings during the legislative session. As Director Catlin and Zane Kessler pointed out, the legislative session is expected to begin with seriousness in mid-February. And with your approval, we'll be scheduling those bi-weekly legislative calls as necessary to discuss and allow you to take positions on water-related legislation. If there's any objection to that, please let us know. But those will be again at noon, most likely, and we're going to try to do those by Zoom since we all seem to be fluent in that. We appreciate your willingness to do that. The other, I would say the only other thing I would call your attention to, we have regular quarterly meetings that are scheduled. The final item that is in there is a board fact-finding mission to the lower basin. We've actually talked about this for well over a year now, going down and looking at particularly agricultural fallowing and some of the augmentation efforts that are being made down in the lower basin. This was canceled obviously last year due to COVID. We would like to try to do it. We're with your agreement, we will shoot for mid-November of 2021, pending, of course, health orders and pandemic conditions. But it is something this board has done in the past, and I think it's incredibly useful to understand, to help the board understand some of the physical water use and the political dynamics that are going on down the lower basin. I think it helps you achieve and do your job. And I think it's essential for the protection of Western Colorado's water rights that we have a solid understanding of what's going on the ground down there. So unless there's anybody who objects strongly to that, we are going to try to schedule that in mid-November, and we'll be working with some of our contacts down there to set up some, hopefully a really good experience. So appreciate your willingness to participate in that to the extent you're able. Other than that, I would just say, I know that the Colorado Water Congress virtual convention is coming up here February 9th through the 12th. Would encourage board members, if you're interested in attending, the district will, as it has in the past, paid your registration fee. We will not be paying any travel fees this year since it's all by Zoom. So if you would like to be registered, please contact Lori DiPaolo, and she'll take care of that if she hasn't already contacted you on that. So, with that, I turn over any questions about our meetings that are scheduled right now or on the agenda. Kathleen?
Thank you. How do the committee meetings work? Do those just get scheduled periodically by the chair, or I was just wondering?
Yeah, they do. And I at least my experience recently has been that the committees have not been very active, other than perhaps information and outreach. I know our EA team is anxious to get an information and outreach committee meeting scheduled fairly soon. And so we'll do that, but I'm not aware of any of the other committees having a need to meet anytime soon.
We try to make it just on an as needed basis. And so, so sometimes the committees don't meet very frequently. Okay. All right. What does anyone else have for the good of the order? Questions, concerns, any other last parting thoughts?
Well, maybe goodbye again.
You keep saying that, David.
Yeah.
We may see you again still.
Have you seen the movie Groundhog Day, Dave?
Yeah.
All right. Thank you, everybody. I think this was a long meeting, but it seemed to me that we covered some really important topics in a very meaningful fashion. Again, thanks to Andy. Thank you to the entire staff. The staff works very, very hard to pull these meetings together and to make them efficient and yet effective. So again, thank you to our staff, and we just missed the lunches, the breaks. So hopefully April, right?
Yep.
All right, thanks everyone, and we'll see you in April. Well, we'll see you in mid-February.
Yep. Thank you very much. Yeah.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.